It is 3/11 of 2015. We continue now with Alexander Kojeve in Volume 2 of his Phenomenology of Right, which addresses the specific sphere of right in external historical reality. And he has, starting about 3 lessons back, he's beginning to really give us excellent structural material and really clarify his thought picture of the structure of the sphere of right. So he has really gotten away from the obscure presentation that kind of initiated Volume 2. He's really getting into the heart of it and really starting to give us solid, structural, clear material. This lesson is no exception. Everything's been speaking to the second moment, which is the moment of entering into history, into the external concrete reality of the sphere of right. The same thing will occur here, but now we're going to address the reason of state. Now, the reason of state is the directional sense side of historical reality that informs the sensate side of historical reality, the given. Your given historical reality has an ideal, hidden universality or reason of directional sense that it's not necessarily a written document, but it's an understood directional sense that is present from basically an intersubjective communal point of view that is understood by the community. We understand these basic universal rights. Yours might be founded in a modality you're comfortable with. It may be founded in a economic modality. It may be formed in an ethics modality. It may be formed in a meditation modality. The modality of that mediated directional sense is pretty much individualistic, but there is a reason of state that is lying within and behind the sensate reality of history, and the reason of state informs history with a directional sense of universality. Kojeve wants to address that within his doctrine of right, because for Kojeve, when the individual, self-conscious individual, I should say, posits a view of the universality of right, he or she posits that reality as that right that is intended to be integrated in the reason of state directional sense, to become a part of that universality, to become a part of what the community considers to be important, what the community considers to be essential for human life, what the community considers to be idealistic for human life, that which propagates existential honesty and maturity, the event that creates true humanity. So the positing is actually a opportunity to try to reach that integration into the reason of state, and Kojeve wants to address this very specifically. His first moment is the posited given right. A self acts out of juridical interest, but in a political way. And this is the self's posited political utility of an ideal right. The self seeks to contribute to the reason of state directional sense in reality. So now we get to that second moment, which is going to be, you'll notice on your screen, it dominates the notes. The second moment is the directional integration of the posited right into the reason of state, which constitutes applying of right. It is the process of application. The process of application is this integration into the reason of state. Now, number one, political desire. Right desires to maintain a given state. The right desires to be a part of that maintaining directional sense in the reason of state. There is the concept of hastening for Kojeve. He says that looking back at our last lesson, the transition from a fading right to an emerging right is enjoined by the state, and its action of hastening, which means its enjoining tendency to welcome the emergence of the new universality of right. So there is an intersubjective tendency that we kind of become aware of in our external reality that kind of becomes our nodal point of entrance, kind of our targeted area of positing. We see a reality in history that looks like it's getting ready to open up to universality. It's getting ready to actualize as something better, something more mature for anthropogenic reality. And that's where we do our positing of our individual right. He calls that the hastening moment, which means it's the tendency moment of the region of state opening itself for an opportunity of positing. Now, number 3, the fundamental categories that are enjoined in the region of state. It is a 3-layered directional sense. It contains, for the right, it contains the ideal of justice. In the layer of state, it contains the governmental right that we've discussed in previous lessons, but it will contain that governmental right, which is what? It's the Speech Act. It'll contain the Speech Act. But in this lesson, he continues and he says it also contains a layer of existential custom, and this is the existential anthropogenic modalities that condition each other within the whole of the reason of state. So there is a mediator between this directional sense of the reason of state and the sensate sense of your given reality, and that mediating entity, that mediating overlapping realm is the realm of modality, because it's going to determine through what window you do your positing. Do you posit through the modality of economics? Do you posit through the modality of ethics? Do you posit through the modality of Christian religion? Do you posit through the modality of Buddhist meditation? In some way, you're trying to contribute to the reason of state, the directional sense of history and humanity. You're trying to affect the universality of humanity in moving toward a more mature anthropogenic state. And that is going to be the layer of the existential custom, or the anthropogenic modalities that communicate your positing to the sensate sense. Now, for posited given right to be integrated into the reason of state, it must be efficacious. It must find that moment of correspondence that we talked about last time. Right as reason of state tries to transform society and state in a directional way. So as we said, reason of state is that directional sense that wants to be comprised of a universality that tries to move society forward, move humanity forward, move history forward toward a greater and more mature anthropogenic, existential, mature humanity. So 5, the juridical evolution. Alongside the sanctioned reason of state, there can be a customary right, and the customary right is where that dunamis potential is on the verge of appearing. So this gets back to that hastening attribute we talked about. There are nodal points. When you look out at your history, there are some nodal points of tendency of appearing, the tendency of the new universality appearing, a more mature universality appearing, and those nodal points are going to be the marked out target area that you should take up for your positing, because they are on the verge of actualizing and becoming the new corresponding universal right. And so this customary right is also available, hidden but available to be unveiled within our history. The reason of state is the entity that calls up and actualizes the customary potential dunamis moment. So we've mentioned this before, but when the right exists in reality, we've already talked about this, it exists as energia, and energia is, we've learned, it's self-propagating power of the right to co-create, to energize and create emerging life, these emerging moments of the new universality that's coming into fruition. Now, the third moment for Kojeve is the juridical political equilibrium, because, as we've already discovered, the governmental layer doesn't always fully correspond to the juridical layer, to the reason of state sense that's being informed by the juridical element. And if it's going to be truly universal and a true, mature, honest governmental right, it needs to find that correspondence. So the directional sense of right will distort itself slightly in order to fit itself into the reason of state. It will make compromises, and the sensate sense of state governmental right will mutilate itself slightly in order to open up the reason of state for compromise. So Kojeve tells us that the synthesis is always a compromise. It's always a not quite perfect universality. The ideal of justice is always applied to the reason of state as a compromise, as the realm of sanctioning that is not quite there. It's on its way there. There's the ideal of perfect democracy. There's the ideal of a democracy of justice and honor. There is that ideal, but we always have concrete compromises of that aren't quite perfectly there. Now, the directional sense of the reason of state is relational through the various existential modalities. And he gives a couple examples, such as right and morality, right and religion. And then he says every self that represents a modality sees itself as a self-consciousness positing a judgment of universality. We always, and this is true, we always view universality through the modality which we are most accustomed to, most educated in, and most comfortable in. I'm going to be looking at my judgment of universality because of my background and my education. Be looking at it through Christian systematic theology. Others will look at it through Buddhist meditation. Others will look at it through social ethics or sociology. Whatever our particular modality of interest and education will determine how our self-consciousness views that judgment of universality. So very brief, but we're getting a better picture now of the layers of the reason of state, the tri-mutual layering of the reason of state. So like I say, Kojeve is really giving us a better structural picture now of his sphere of right. That wraps us up through 176.